This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome in to another edition of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Bartholomew, today discussing the future of work in Rhode Island and beyond with Tom Nardacci of the Westwey Club, the new co-working space at the Turk's Head building in downtown Providence. All right, so this is an interesting episode, kind of looking past COVID, really, at what work will look like everywhere, but specifically here in Providence. And as the city of Providence goes, so goes the state of Rhode Island. We certainly know that. So we kind of zoom in on the co-working trend, the co-working phenomenon that has really boomed in cities like New York and Boston, Philadelphia. But with the Wexford building here in Providence, and now with the Westwey Club opening up in the downtown portion of the city, you know, you start to think, okay, one of the major changes that we've experienced in COVID, you know, working from home, just sort of rethinking how we get work done. How can that benefit the state? How can that benefit all of us and create a more practical and a more prosperous workforce, right? You know, prosperous economically, prosperous lifestyle-wise, and put Providence in a position to, in the post-COVID world, you know, kind of take a step up and help drive this state forward. I mean, that's something that we've been talking about a lot on this show. And it's essential. You know what I mean? We've got to be able to find a way to raise the bar, if you will. So I think co-working definitely factors into that. So this is a fun and interesting look into the new co-working space here in the state of Rhode Island. Okay, so obviously the big story right now, and we're going to stay right on top of this over on the Facebook group, btown.stream, and on my other socials, at Bill Bartholomew, on Twitter and Instagram. COVID-19 numbers are spiking. The governor's announcing new restrictions. You know, we're kind of monitoring this throughout the day, every day, all of us together. And my sense is probably not much different than yours, which is that we're heading to something along the lines of a lockdown, something along the lines of what we experienced in the early spring. And hopefully you're all getting prepared for that. Now, I don't mean necessarily storing, you know, canned goods and, you know, punching a hole in your wall and making a secret door where you store, 5 years worth of canned goods, but just mentally prepared for it. And, I think we're heading to that point. I don't think it's an unrealistic thing to say. It's just a matter of what will it look like and what can we do to keep each other safe? What can we do to keep each other safe, obviously, from the virus, but also from the mental burnout that may come from this. And with Thanksgiving approaching next week, I hope you're not planning to travel, to have a bonfire with 75 people in someone's backyard or anything like that. I mean, come on, let's try to dial this thing in. Now, there's good news about the vaccine. Rhode Island is going to be one of 4 states that is sort of piloting the distribution of the vaccine. Now, the vaccine that Pfizer is producing, there's some major challenges. Obviously, it needs to be stored at a significantly cold temperature. And there's also 2 doses that need to be taken. I think it's a 21-day interval. So there's a lot of logistical challenges to this. At least Rhode Island is one of the 4 states that's kind of piloting getting the physical vaccine into the hands of medical providers who can then get it into those who are most vulnerable, being on the front lines, healthcare workers. And I guess they're going to put teachers into the, sort of the second wave of those who will receive a vaccine. So look, there's a ton going on in this area. And honestly, the best way to keep on top of it is through the social media apps. Again, Instagram, Twitter, at Bill Bartholomew, or btown.stream. That'll take you over to the Facebook group, the B-Town Facebook group, that is. And that's a great forum for interactive discussion. A couple other things. I want to thank Convergence Rhode Island for a little profile. You can find the link to that in the bios on my Instagram page or over on the Facebook group. Nice little profile talking about this podcast, the social media stuff, the new TV show on Rhode Island PBS, and even a little bit of the WPRO stuff that's been kind of resurging here back on the radio. I'll be back with you next week on the radio as well. I'm filling in for Matt Allen, I think 1 or 2 days. I have to check that. So we'll be able to get the live local interaction going. I love doing that just so we can get on you can call up the station. We can get into a live mode. It's a nice venue to check into, and I enjoy doing it very much, especially when the B-Town audience hops on the radio. Nothing like it. By the way, Bartholomew Town, you know the drill by now. It's a listener-supported program. We're over here doing this 365, 24/7 because of you. And there's a few ways you can support. One, you can share this episode on social media or pass it on via WhatsApp or text message. Number 2, leave a rating and review wherever you're listening right now. And number 3, if you want to go a step further, head over to patreon.com/BartholomewTown or click the support link where you're listening right now. For as little as $3 per month, you can help to sustain the independent journalism, opinion, analysis, and entertainment that we've become known for. You can go even further, and for $10 a month, you'll get exclusive content that includes commentary by myself. We've had Ted Nisi on from WPRI. We've had Ian Donis on, giving some insight into the presidential elections. We've had Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz with his commentary on all things COVID-19. And I think this month we'll have what will be a commentary of some sort. So you can get that, the B-Town Insider podcast, that only comes with a $10 per month membership at the Patreon page, patreon.com/BartholomewTown. Okay, let's get to it. New co-working space here in Rhode Island, the future of work, and how can Rhode Island as a whole get ahead of the curve, start to prepare now for what comes after this pandemic. All right, so today we're talking about the future of work, and this is a conversation that's really relevant to Providence, particularly when you think about our downtown, Westminster Street. This is kind of a tired conversation, but there's not a lot of businesses on Westminster Street that are, open, especially at night. We see a lot of new projects that are on the real estate side, sometimes come in with more optimism than hard data as to what will, think about the Fane Tower, for example, the housing development that was proposed. But co-working in general is something that is kind of proving to be a new model, even pre-COVID, but certainly post-COVID seems to make sense. We have the Wexford Innovation Hub here, the CIC building in Providence, and now we're in the legendary Turk's Head building. We've got the Westwey Club. So I guess kind of give us an intro in terms of what you're all about and what you're bringing to Providence.
Bill, so first of all, finding Providence for us, we're from out of town, obviously, but we hope that our business and Westwey Club looks, feels, and acts like a homegrown startup. So we've really tried to, we're a small business, but we've started in upstate New York, and we've had some success over the last 4 years around the capital in New York State, where I call home. And we started to look around the area, around the Northeast, saying, look, can we do this again someplace else? Other operators are opening up around us here, and we think more will and should. So we started looking at places that we felt were underdeveloped, and Providence popped up for a couple of reasons. We looked at, 50 locations around the Northeast, and we chose Rhode Island as our first out-of-state venture. First and foremost, the commute is pretty quick for us. So we're in town in under 3 hours, kind of door to door, and really, there's a lot of good things happening in downtown Providence. One of the things that we looked at closely in all of the markets, and what we found success where we are based, is the development of residential downtown. Providence has started to really embrace downtown living, and there's a lot of projects that are lining up, are still in the pipeline. And, because we think for a space like ours, a third of our membership, a third of the people who will work in our space will actually walk, right? And Providence has done a lot of things to embrace that walkability, and the downtown core is very walkable. So when I first came into town, we looked all around town, and I picked Turk's Head because obviously it's iconic and people know the address. But, Westminster Street itself is it's a charming, walkable street. There is a lot of life in the storefronts. There's a nice variety of restaurants, access to culture shows, in the non-COVID world. So it had all the good stuff we look as amenities nearby. I think that the investments in Wexford too was something that I looked at as a positive, because I think spaces like ours and spaces like Wexford, we do better when there's clusters. So it's better when there's a clustering of flexible spaces, not just one-offs, not just one person doing it. So I think it's a good environment to do business in. And in terms of underdeveloped, the reality is Rhode Island and really the Providence area should probably have, if I'd have to do the calculations, we probably should have 1 million square feet of flexible workspace. So just to put it in terms of like, what is Wexford? 60,000. What are we? You start adding the spaces up. You're like, wow, we're hundreds of thousands of square feet off for what we should have had pre-COVID. So these were the kind of national real estate forecast saying, look, more companies want flexible. And the conversations we're having now, by the way, this is where everything is going to head after pandemic, vaccine, people get back to regular life. Companies and startups and small businesses, they want flexible terms and they want flexibility, and they want to now be able to integrate kind of the successes they've seen of work from home. Companies have had employees working from home for a while, and they're saying, hey, this could work. This works for this team. These are the teams that it maybe doesn't work for. So they're really going through this assessment period where they're saying, well, maybe we don't need as much space, but it would be nice if we had a place to go to. And we're starting to have those conversations too.
Yeah, certainly you think about obviously Manhattan and really anywhere, major companies that had 3 or 4 buildings sometimes of space are now possibly contracting down to 1 or 2. And when you think about co-working spaces, I guess the conventional thought was, all right, well, it's some creative kid. He's like a graphic designer. He builds websites and maybe freelances. So he needs a desk so that he can get out of his house and feel like he's going to be productive. But now that definition is shifting, and larger corporations and companies and small businesses that have multiple teams are probably looking at spaces like yours in Wexford and saying, well, wait a minute, that would work really well for our purposes. Maybe there's a conference room or a place to do client interfacing, but we don't necessarily need to have our own office. So what kind of packages do you offer? Are you gearing towards more like a permanent tenant, or people who are maybe they need a conference room for a day, or a little bit of everything?
It's a mix. So let me start by saying that, so the average age of our member in our current communities is 35. Right. So the idea of co-working, being for like, hey, I'm right out of school. I have an idea, I want to freelance. We have members that are in their 20s, but we have members that are in their 60s. And we've done a nice job in our existing communities to curate and cultivate that, that cross-generational, collision, because I think, in addition to the types of professionals, the types of companies, I think generationally, we're seeing people working together because of our space, that someone maybe is a little older, someone maybe a little younger, maybe a little more, talented in new areas that maybe someone who's older isn't. So I think that what we're built best for is 1 to 8 people. Right. So we're a space that's, look, if you're a freelancer, or you're a solopreneur, or you're a 2 or 3 team startup trying to make it go, if you're a solo consultant who's got 30 years of practice, or you have a small law firm, you're a one man or one woman band, we're a good spot for you. We're good for you for up to a point where you start getting to close to 10 or 12 people. And then really, so what we're trying to do so a third of our companies fit that mold, where they're startups that are growing. And so we want to incubate those companies. So 1 to 8 to 10. Now we want you to spin out and find space downtown, find space in the state. So that's about a third. The other 2/3 are people who they want a place, right? And so this is what we're finding out now too, especially. So when in March, if I go back to March, when New York State shut things down, we really braced for the worst, right? We thought, this is going to be 80, 90, 100% of our business is going to go away. And what we found is, because our model is a mix of private offices as well as open space, so the idea of co-working as a bunch of tables and chairs and like go to it, the model has evolved since we were kind of started things in Williamsburg. And I think now it's really built for this idea of small office suites, and so a majority of our office members kept their offices, and over time they slowly have come back, right? So we still are only about 30% in terms of who's actually come back to work, but we've retained 85-90% of our offices. So most of our members that we got has stayed. And I think the big reason for it is that, our people choose us not simply because of rational reasons or because of utility, right? So yeah, like there's better value here, right? So, you get, a fast internet, you get community, you get events, you get, all these things included in our price point. But people choose us because of emotional reasons too, in that, you have that person who has a home office that they love. And I think about myself when I started out my first business. I started a public relations and marketing firm, and my first business was based out of my bedroom, right? It worked for me. I had it set up. I had everything pretty much that I needed. But as I grew, as I got more clients, I just needed a better setup. And co-working didn't exist at the time. So, I was working out of coffee shops, and I was trying to use the Chamber of Commerce's conference room when I could, so I was trying to find these assets because I was working with, pretty high-end clients and trying to, they would say, well, where can we meet? And, I was always going to client offices, but there's times where I couldn't. So I'd meet them at Starbucks. I mean, it's so difficult to do business that way. And so everything that I built into these communities is kind of what I went through as a small company. We grew our firm to 15 people. Maybe in the summer we'd have 5 or 10 interns. So we were up to 25 people at one point. Now the challenge has become different, right? As you grow your company beyond just, I need a conference room. Now all of a sudden I was spending my time building culture. I was building events for my team, and I was getting catering, and I was building coffee, and there's all these things that we had to do all of a sudden because, you had a couple dozen people working in your space, that it was taken away from other things that I had to do with the business. So these are the things that are built into, our spaces, that people can walk in and literally plug in and be productive. And then we create the culture. We help create the culture. We help create that atmosphere.
Discover over 200 episodes of Rhode Island's podcast of record, the Bartholomew Town Podcast, on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your pods. Or head over to our website, ripodcast.com. For the very latest on the impact of COVID-19 in Rhode Island, give me a follow on Twitter and Instagram at Bill Bartholomew, and be sure to join the Bartholomew Town Podcast Facebook group. Simply head to btown.stream, and it'll link you right to it. What would you say about the future of working in terms of, obviously, the COVID crisis is still, we're seeing significant numbers here in Rhode Island. Who knows exactly what's going to happen in terms of lockdowns and whatever. It's not looking good right now. But especially as companies look to a point where there'll be a vaccine, there'll be some sort of realistic ability to treat someone who's been afflicted with the virus, et cetera, and the work spaces of pre-COVID times start to get a hard look, I guess, from certain employers. Do you sense that co-working is going to become that much more attractive? And how is that playing into what you would describe as the future of work? Obviously, you're biased as the entrepreneur behind a co-working space, but you must sense something's coming here, to open a new space. You had your grand opening in the thick of a pandemic.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely biased, and I definitely have reasons to believe, Mm-hmm. The first thing I'll say is that, I think the state, the governor, the Department of Health in Rhode Island has done a good job, managing this crisis and being transparent with, kind of the ebbs and flows of what's going on. And I think that that's important, right? So I think that transparency and information, reasoning why certain decisions are being made is very important. So I think that leadership at the state level, continues to, be very important. We see that in New York State as well. It's very important that there's a clear picture, so businesses have a sense to say, okay, what can I do and what can't I do? So go back to March 14th, when we had to shut down our businesses. We had just started the construction in Turk's Head, so we're at a point where, but what I'll say though is we had started this project a whole year before that. So we had already been in Providence for a year trying to decide what to do to build things up. And here's the way I look at this. I have we signed a 10-year lease with Turk. So we look at this through the lens of a long-term commitment. And that's why I mentioned in the beginning that we really view ourselves as a homegrown startup, right? So yeah, every startup is going to have challenges, right? Now, the challenges of pandemic, the challenges of COVID, no one could ever prepare for that. When I go back to when I first started my first business, mid 2006, I was just kind of getting things going, and 2008 happens, and different circumstances, but businesses are always dealt with these challenges. And certainly, so in March when we had to shut things down and we had to delay kind of the construction, look, it benefits us more and more to push things back. But we had agreements that we had made. We had signed contracts. So in a sense, we had to move forward. Because we had made commitments. The landlord has been very cooperative with us, and was working in good faith to build out the space. And what we just did for our internal planning, we said, look, it's going to take a while to build this up. Now, when I had opened my second space in Albany, across the street from the Capitol, we sold out of our space in six to 8 weeks. I mean, the demand is there, right, in regular times. And so that's what fueled our excitement, that we said, look, these middle markets, it's not New York, it's not Chicago, all these places that have, huge co-working and huge flexible space industries, places like Providence, places like Albany, Pittsburgh, even, Baltimore, Rochester, New York, they're underdeveloped, right? And so there's a demand, there's a pent-up demand. And the biggest challenge is letting people know that you're there, right? To be able to get to people and say, look, we're here, we're available, you can come here. There's no barrier to entry. So what we did in terms of planning is, over the summer, we worked up our plans to say, look, it's going to take us 6 to 8 months to get Westwey Club where our Albany space was in 6 to 8 weeks. So we have a long horizon here. And so this idea, so we did open up, and we're still calling this our soft opening, because we're really, I don't know if we can cut a ribbon until we actually have the space full, so we're in this for kind of a long run. So that's the upfront. So the question though was, where do we go from here? I do think, and we're getting so many inquiries right now, more than ever, from large companies who are trying to figure out, how does what we offer fit into their overall planning? Now, the sales cycle for a company like that is going to be long, right? So a solo entrepreneur walks in, says, I love this space, I want to work here, let me sign up. Boom, done. A larger company that says, look, I have an enterprise team, I have 15 people, we need a place for them to go, a couple days a week. They're all trying to figure that out. I think that'll all work itself out throughout 2021. A lot of companies I talk to right now, a lot of them re-sign their leases for a year, right? And so maybe next year they re-sign them again for a year. But these enterprise conversations are definitely happening. You're going to see that company that has, and this is and I do think that it's going to have reverberations throughout the real estate industry. So those traditional landlords who are just banking on these 20, 30, 40,000 square foot leases. I think companies like that are looking to say, how do I not have all that? Because I do think that they have teams that can work from home. We were talking to a healthcare provider, a large HMO, who, they have a call center, right? That they always staffed. Well, so the CEO of this health provider told me that they're actually getting more efficiencies from their call center staff working from their homes, right? So they may never bring back their call center to an office environment, right? And so that's an example. But then they're saying, well, but our lower and middle managers aren't as productive, right? For whatever reason, they don't have the data points to see if they're efficient enough, or they need to be in person because they need to be trained, or because they need to collaborate, they need teamwork. So they're starting to see the challenges of, well, not everyone can be work from home. So maybe some segments never have to come back, but others are these people definitely have to be in a space where they can talk to other people.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. And so this is your first here in Providence. This is your first venture outside of New York State. How's it going so far? I mean, have you signed anybody up? Are you able to? Have you had at least good discussions? Obviously, being in COVID, it's kind of tough to imagine getting, a strong response right now. But how do you feel about this going forward the next year, 2 years, especially for those companies that you say, would probably not want to sign a 10-year lease somewhere and have a bunch of empty desks potentially for a year or two?
So it's slow going, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't think that that's unexpected. I mean, you only have probably, I don't know, maybe 15, 20, 25% of the workforce back to work anyways. There's a lot of uncertainty, especially now heading into the winter, right? So we're seeing spikes. So people are definitely very conservative, which we understand. We have a whole bunch of proposals out to different companies of different size. So I think the activity, I would call it fair. I wouldn't say that, we're thrilled at the start, but I don't think it's unexpected, right? I mean, it is that time. But let me tell you something that I'm ecstatic about. I love Providence and I love Rhode Island. And by the way, talk about spoiled. You guys are spoiled because you have access to the ocean. Yep. And you're spoiled because of access to seafood, and you're spoiled because I've been doing a tour of restaurants around town. I mean, the density of restaurants and the talent coming out of Johnson and Wales. I think it's just, there's so many good things there. It's really, and by the way, so how I found Providence, truth be told. So it was on our list of places, different things we were looking at, metrics, colleges, obviously the density of colleges nearby, the development downtown. But my wife and I had done a week in Newport a few years ago.
Oh yeah.
And we were always Jersey Shore people, we lived down there, and her family had gone to Jersey Shore. So we did our first kind of week in Rhode Island. And I was shocked at how close it was. And I hadn't been to Providence, since I was in high school. I did a basketball camp at PC when I was a high school basketball player, and we drove through town. I just loved what I saw. I loved the feel of it, and I think that's the thing that I'm most excited about. I've spent a lot of time there over the last 2 years. Gotten to know some really cool people. There's a real look, there's a grittiness to the town, which I love, which is what we have here. So that also, like, there's something to be said about that.
Yeah, post-industrial right there. It's similar to upstate New York, Schenectady, Troy, Scotia, Albany, Capital District.
Very much. And look, in the politics are the politics, right? Like, the nice part about the politics of Rhode Island, here, I'll say this, it's like, it's easy to get to know people.
Yeah.
Albany's the same way. It's 1 degree of separation. So we've gotten a chance to get to know a lot of people in a short amount of time. And because we come from a state capital, Albany, we get it. We understand that environment. I can understand how some people might walk into town and maybe be frustrated by it because they don't understand it. But because we come from that kind of ecosystem here, we get how politics and government and business and, it all plays in together. So, but that said, I'm telling you, man, I'm excited, especially for the summers. I'm excited to be close to the ocean. We went down to, we spent a couple days in Narragansett. Just awesome, man.
Yeah, it's a great state because, you have that from Newport to Providence, from Providence to South County, 30, 40 minutes. And then obviously getting up to Boston or down to New York is, there have been plenty of times I've gone from Providence to New York in the morning and driven back at 8:00 at night. Tons of times. So it's a great state.
And we've done that day trip too, and I think our exposure to New England, was very much like we have a lot of friends in Boston, so we spent a lot of time in Boston. I don't have a reason to go to Boston. We're going to go to Boston, So yeah. The only thing I'll tell you, here's the problem in Rhode Island, and I'm going to be honest about this.
Yep.
I got to find more Yankee fans.
Oh, they're out there. They air Yankee games on an AM radio station here, so there's some kind of market.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. see how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.